So recently I've been looking at Darren Till's Instagram page, and I've noticed that he's mentioned a lot of times how he expects himself to lose like several times before he wins the title, and he's never going to quit. And he's looking at fighters like Darren Till and Charles Oliveira as inspiration for that, and he thinks in the long run eventually he will capture the UFC gold. Now, in my opinion, anyone can accomplish anything if they really want it hard enough. I mean, if you look at Micheal Bisping, I think Micheal Bisping's a good example of that. I mean, early in his career, like, he was on a bit of a tear, but then when he went into the UFC, he had several losses against top level opposition, and then after that, obviously we found out what happened with his eye with Vitor Belfort, and eventually he managed to capture UFC gold at the age of 37, 10 years after he debuted in the UFC. I think he debuted when he's 26 or 27. And then you got the likes of like a Charles Oliveira. After 10 years of being in the UFC, he was a dark horse of the division, and somehow he turned it around, and now he managed to win a title after Khabib left. Obviously he had to fight Michael Chandler for that opportunity, and he managed to pull it off. And then you got obviously Jan Blachowicz as well. Jan Blachowicz took several losses, and then at the age of 37 he managed to capture the title. So I think anyone can do anything, and I think these dark horses have shown that if you just keep trudging along and you keep going, despite the losses that you've had and the physical and mental trauma you've been through. I mean, anyone that saw a Charles Oliveira versus Max Holloway, none of them would have looked at him and thought, you know what, this guy's going to become a future champion. They never would have thought that. If anyone would have saw Micheal Bisping get knocked out by Henderson, no one would have said, you know what, this guy's going to become a champion in the future. And against the fighter that beat him as well, he beat Luke Rockhold. Luke Rockhold beat him first, and then he beat Luke Rockhold as well. And several of these opponents have done this. I mean, no one would have looked at him and thought, you know what, he's going to do it. No one ever would have thought of that. So Darren Till can do it, but the common denominator between all of these fighters is that they developed other aspects of their game. If you look at, for example, Charles Oliveira was not really a striking specialist. His forte, his base was Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and he became a fourth Dan in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So he's a black belt, fourth Dan in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And then he developed his striking, and when his striking became good enough, that's when he started to take off. Now his striking is very good and proficient. I mean, he knocked out Michael Chandler with a left hook, and that's how he won the UFC title. If you look at Jan Blachowicz's base is actually kickboxing and Muay Thai, but he developed his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and he's a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. The problem with Darren Till is Darren Till hasn't seemed to have developed an all-round game. I think to become a champion in the MMA, you have to be an all-rounder. You have to be great at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, great at wrestling, great at striking, and great at probably like just becoming a great all-round mixed martial artist is what's needed to become a champion. And I feel like if you look at the likes of Bisping, Charles Oliveira, and Jan Blachowicz, they've actually done that. They've actually managed to develop they've developed that side of their game to become champion. They when they first started, they weren't good at one thing. They were really good at one thing, but they weren't good at another thing. So Charles Oliveira, his striking wasn't as good as his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but then he developed his striking, and then he managed to outstrike Michael Chandler, and that's how he became champion. If you look at Jan Blachowicz's base was Muay Thai, so he was very good at striking, but his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was not at a certain point. But then he developed his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and that's when he became champion. So it depends on whether Darren Till is willing to work on that side of his ability. It can happen. It can definitely happen. He's young enough to do it. He's only 28. So if in the next 9 years he dedicates himself to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, develops that part of his game, and actually takes on board criticism about his style, he can do it. But it's whether he's willing to do that, if he's willing to go through that. And obviously it's the psychological aspect of it. Can he bounce back from all these losses? He seems to be in a good place mentally, and obviously Micheal Bisping gave him a lot of props and said to him, listen, keep your chin up high, you can do this. Charles Oliveira also said the same thing to him. So obviously these people are champions. These people know what it takes to get to this level. So if they're saying that to him, it's because they see it in him that he can do it. So he can do it, but it's whether he's willing to willing to go through that level of development to do it. I'm not sure if he is, because when he went all the way to Brazil, he developed his language skills, but he never seemed to develop the Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Even though he stayed out there for 4 years, he trained out there for 4 years. In 4 years, his Brazilian jiu-jitsu could have been at I'm not saying at the top level, but he could have at least been at a comparable level. The problem is, when he went in there with Derek Brunson, it didn't look that good, did it? So, and to be fair to him, in the UK, I think there's a lack of talent when it comes to wrestling. If you look at American culture and Russian culture, they're completely obsessed with wrestling. They do tend to meddle in wrestling. Russia and America tend to meddle in wrestling quite a bit, and they do have a culture where they like wrestling and they do college wrestling. But in the UK, we don't really have that. So I think to some extent, Darren Till is late to the game to some extent. But the fact that he spent 4 years in Brazil and he didn't really develop his Brazilian jiu-jitsu as much as he should have done is a little bit alarming. So I don't know if he's willing to make that transition, that change, that sacrifice to get to that level. But if he is willing to do that, and he's willing to put in the time to learn the gaps in his game, then he can definitely become champion. I mean, Charles Oliveira, Jan Blachowicz, all of these fighters have shown that they can do it. So yeah, that's my opinion. Whether Darren Till can become champion, like the people that you mentioned, like the Micheal Bispings, the Jan Blachowicz, the Charles Oliveiras of the world, can he do it? He can do it, but it's whether he's willing to make that sacrifice to do it. That's the question, and I'm not sure if he is, because he doesn't seem to have really developed his Brazilian jiu-jitsu to a high enough level when he stayed in Brazil for the last 4 years. I mean, in 4 years he could have at least been in a position where he knew how to defend takedowns. You don't have to be a completely great Brazilian jiu-jitsu artist to become a great UFC fighter. I mean, Israel Adesanya is a good testament to that, but he developed something in his game, which is his takedown defense, which stops him from going to the ground. And I think he's a purple belt in Brazilian jiu-jitsu, so he's not a complete novice when it comes to Brazilian jiu-jitsu. But that's the true meaning of a mixed martial artist. You have to become comfortable in the areas that you're uncomfortable in, and I don't know if Darren Till's willing to do that. But if he is willing to do that and is willing to take on constructive criticism, then in the next decade he could become champion. But I don't know if he's willing to go past the trauma of his losses, because I feel like these losses have hit him pretty hard, and now he's got injuries, like he needs to do ACL surgery and all this other stuff. So yeah, there's a lot of questions surrounding whether he can do it, but if he's willing to take on the constructive criticism, then he probably can do it. So yeah, that's my opinion. Tell me your opinion below. Do you think Darren Till can ever become champion? Do you think he could be like a Jan Blachowicz or a Micheal Bisping and become a late bloomer and pick up a title in his late 30s? Or do you just think it's not going to happen and he's way past it and he's just never going to get to that point? Tell me below what you think, and like and subscribe to the channel. I've got a lot more content coming your way. Peace out.